In order for us all to enter college, we had to go through a series of standardized tests such as the PSSAs, the ACTs, or the SATs. I would imagine none of us really enjoy taking these lengthy or stressful exams. Some of us, myself included, might have actually had a very unfortunate experience while doing so. When I was in 10th grade, I took the SATs for the first time. I was nervous, but like any typical high schooler, I just sort of blew off the studying beforehand and hoped for the best. I had a good breakfast the morning of, but that really couldn't prepare me for what was to happen next. I got to the exam, I started section 1, and I didn't know anything that was on the exam. I started to panic, and I pushed through, but it was a horrible experience for me feeling that stress. Well then, I started section 2, and go figure, my stomach starts growling louder than anyone could possibly imagine. The kid beside me, he looks over at me, he starts staring at me every 30 seconds with this disgusted look on his face, and what could I do? I couldn't help it. It was just the standardized test. It made me nervous, and what was I supposed to do? Well, now imagine being a 6-year-old student trying to do the same thing. Standardized testing isn't what we should be doing in elementary schools. Yes, we need assessments in order to see how children are progressing, but there are much less stressful ways in order that we can do this. First of all, it is important to know why we do standardized testing or child assessments in elementary schools. And it's not just because it's a good way to evaluate a child. Society's curious. They want to know what's going on in the human mind, and by studying children, we can learn this a lot better. According to Dr. Feeney here at Penn State Harrisburg, an assessment is the process of collecting, synthesizing, and interpreting the information to aid classroom decision-making. It includes information gathered about pupils, instruction, and classroom climate. Assessments help more than just to evaluate a child's intelligence. It evaluates the learning center, and it evaluates the learning conditions. Sometimes learning centers and the conditions that these centers are in can affect how children learn. If they're under budget, some students may not even have books in order to study. So how can a child learn if he doesn't have the proper equipment to do so? It's not fair. There are two different types of assessments that are being commonly used in the schools today. The first kind, and the most popular kind, is standardized testing. However, there is a less popular but possibly more effective method called a portfolio. Standardized testing is popular because every child has to take this test, and every child will have the same test. And also, the conditions in which the children are taking these tests are the same for every child in the room. So if one sound is affecting one child, chances are it's affecting every child in the room. So it's easy to say that because they're under the same conditions, theoretically, they are having the same sort of test mode going on. And it's also an easy side-by-side comparison in order to evaluate the different children, because it's the same test, and they're supposed to know the same material. So looking at these things side by side, you can easily evaluate what the child knows. However, there are a few flaws within standardized testing. Not all students are good test takers. As I told you in the beginning, I'm not the best test taker, and yes, that did affect my SATs. I can take a normal test, such as a math exam. However, standardized testing, a 3-hour length test, I can't do that. And young children especially are easily distressed. They're very perceptive to other people's feelings around them. When teachers are saying you need to get an adequate amount of sleep, you need to get this much sleep, 8 hours, no less, or you need to have a big breakfast the morning before, they become worried because they don't know why they have to do it this week and not any of the other weeks. So it's confusing for them, and it really affects how they're going to perform. And standardized testing only evaluates one point in the child's life. If it only can take that one day that that test is on, only that much information that they've learned, and that's what they're evaluating. Yes, they can take the test later on throughout the year, but it's not really fair for a one point in time sort of test. That's why portfolios are much better. A portfolio is a purposeful collection of student work that tells a story of the student's effort, progress, and achievement throughout the year. There are several advantages to the portfolio. It's not evaluated by some sort of set standard. It's looked at by teachers, parents, professionals, doctors, all alike. They all have an input. They observe the children in their natural settings in school, in home, their actual health. So it's not even just seeing how much information a child could grasp, because we don't only grow by information. We grow by the situations that we're put in and our health. And it's also first-hand observations, so it can give a more accurate account for the child, other than what a Scantron can prove. If you have a special bond with a child, you know how he or she is actually growing, not just by a test. So portfolios actually assess the children over a number of years, not just one point in time, so you can see how the child's growing. And honestly, some disabilities don't even show up until later on in life. So how can one test really evaluate that? If you look at the child over the number of years, if they're not growing in a certain point, such as reading, you won't know that by a standardized test. And there's no stress involved with an unnoticed observation. Children don't even necessarily know that they're being assessed while it's happening, which makes it not stressful. So it's not putting that burden on them to do better. They're just being natural, which is what we really need. And observations provide a more solid assessment than a Scantron could ever do. Yes, students need to be assessed as they grow through the developing years. However, other than forcing stressful standardized tests upon them, there are better ways, such as portfolios, that schools can start to use in order to help more professionally and much better assess these children. Thank you.